Welcome back to the Juicy Delicious Love podcast. My name is Coach Kim Holloway, and we're here to talk about all things life, love, and relationships, especially when it comes to connecting more deeply with ourselves so that we can develop the courage to show up authentically for the beautiful connection and intimacy we all desire with the people we love. This episode is actually a recording of a talk I had the honor to give recently at a beautiful mindfulness gathering put together by the Peninsula Conscious Collective in Hampton, Virginia. The PCC is a social group of gifted and giving individuals that are passionate about connecting. I highly recommend checking out their community. This talk is a very vulnerable share from me about a near-death experience I had that really awakened me to the power of being fully present and connected to love in this moment. Love saved my life, and I'm dedicated to cultivating more of it. I'm thankful you're here to listen, and I encourage you to connect deeply with this experience. I'm sharing and let it impact your life today.
So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share with you today. If you've seen some of the flyers for the agenda for today, you might see a couple different descriptions of what I'm supposed to talk about. I let some of my friends know that I'd be speaking today, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. What are you going to talk about?" And I was like, "I'm going to talk about cultivating connection." And they were like, "Oh, what does that mean?" That just happened out there. So you might be in the same boat. So let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I say cultivating connection. My name is Kim Holloway, and I'm a life coach. I've been a life coach for a little over 10 years. And as a coach, I work with people on a big variety of topics, but I am particularly passionate about helping you cultivate a sense of who you truly are and figuring out how to show up in the world that way. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of pressure throughout our lives, a lot of voices in the world and messages around us that tell us that there's a certain way that we should show up, or there's a certain way that we should look, that there are certain things we should eat, that there are certain people we should be in relationship with, that those relationships should look a certain way. And if that wasn't bad enough, if you show up in the world in a way that's different than that, you will likely be dealt a good dose of judgment and probably some shame. And what comes along with that is this massive fear that if I don't show up the way the world says that I should show up, that I will not belong. And without a sense of belonging, there's massive need in our hearts that's not met. So I love to work and partner with my clients on how do you nurture the courage within to show up in such a way that I am honoring the truth of who I am in this world, despite the risk that some people won't approve. And then, so that's nurturing or cultivating connection with yourself, having the courage to show up as that. But then also, once you do that, how do you connect authentically with people around you? Because showing up in the world with the mask that we wear to fit in is different than showing up in the world as who we actually are. And that impacts how and who we connect with. So cultivating connection within ourselves, but then also how do we cultivate connection with others and the people around us? So that's my passion. And that's what I mean when I say cultivating connection, intentionally, right? Because we can have people all around us and still not be deeply connected with anyone, right? You could be alone in a crowded room, if you will. So some of the flyers that you see, or the agenda that you see related to this event and what I'm talking about said different things, because honestly, leading up to this event, I wasn't really sure how I wanted to approach this topic. At first I thought, let me workshop this, right? Like, let me make you guys partner up in the room and say really uncomfortable things, and let's do some exercises around vulnerability and boundaries. So that's Somebody said to me, I can't wait to hear you talk about boundaries today. I was like, well, not going to really talk about it. But I will say that vulnerability is crucial, right? If you're going to connect authentically with yourself and risk rejection from the world, and if you're going to connect with other people around you in a deep way, then you have to be willing and accepting of the reality that the people that we're close to will inevitably somehow hurt us. So vulnerability is a requirement. It is a precursor for closeness. And the topic of boundaries was high on the list of something I wanted to talk about today, because if we're going to be vulnerable with each other and be close with each other, then we also have to know where I end and where you begin. And we have to know what's okay between us. What am I allowed to do and what are you allowed to do? And how can we both navigate those things in a way that allows us to stay connected? If we're in a relationship and I don't actually know what you're comfortable with or what you're comfortable with, then this increases the odds of hurt. So boundaries are a beautiful way to help us be vulnerable with each other. Very important things. But the reality is that I knew that if I came up here and I just workshopped it and gave you a bunch of tools and practices to help you cultivate connection in your lives, I really have no guarantee that you're going to go home and do any of those things, because I don't actually know you well enough to know if you know why cultivating connection is so important in the first place. So I could easily hand you a workbook full of practices and exercises on this topic, and you could take it home and stick it in your pile of workbooks, and then we wouldn't have gotten any further than that. So that felt like a couple steps too far ahead, and so what I did was I just kind of took a couple steps back and realized that I think the most powerful thing we could talk about today is why bother cultivating connection? Why bother? Why is it important? And for me, success today would be having you leave here with a sense of urgency about how important it is to connect deeply with yourself, to do things that help you feel empowered to show up authentically, and to intentionally, mindfully nurture your connections with other people. So, that said, figured the best way to do that might be to tell you a little story about me and a time in my life when I kind of thought that I had it all together and had a big moment of awakening around whether or not that was true and what the connections in my life really meant. So just over, I guess it was about 13 years, 2011, so 12 or 13 years ago. 12 or 13 years ago, if you'd have looked at my life, you would have seen a woman in her late 20s studying to be a life coach, which makes me laugh now because when I look back at me 10 to 15 years ago, I'm like, what in the world was I going to life coach people about? But I definitely thought that I had a good idea about everything that everyone needed to know about life. And to be fair, everyone in this room has some experience in life that someone else in this room doesn't have. So if you are ever feeling inspired and you want to study how to be a life coach, then absolutely I encourage you to do it because there's someone out there that you can help. And in 10 to 15 years, you'll look back and be like, oh God, I didn't know anything. So thinking about me 10 to 15 years ago is like, ooh. But that's when my first big steps into wanting to be a coach began. I had a full-time job at NASA, the NASA, who was paying me to fly all over the world to share with other space agencies about what NASA Earth Science was doing. So I felt like a really big deal. South America and Europe and Australia and Asia and Africa, like just everywhere, was a very eye-opening, worldview shifting experience. I was driving a pitch black SS brand new Camaro with gunmetal racing stripes down the middle, and it was super sexy. And I was spending a lot of time surrounded by lots of fun, lively people. So if you were to be a fly on the wall, if you got in your time machine and you went back and you looked at, who was Kim and what was her life like then, it looks pretty good. I was making good money, I was traveling the world, I had a sexy car, I had bought a home, and I was surrounded by people. And if you had talked to me, I probably would have gone on and on and on about all of these important things in my life that I was trying to manage and juggle in my relationships, and it would have sounded really exciting and maybe a little dramatic. And I definitely thought that I had it all together. So one night, I'm hanging out with friends, and there was a thing that they used to do a lot. I had not yet joined them in this activity, but we were all hanging out at kind of like a house party, so we're cooking out, there's a fire, and they have a sailboat. And one of the things that they often used to do was to go out on night sails. So they would gather all the life jackets they needed to make sure everyone had access to one. We'd throw all of our phones in a dry bag. If you don't know what a dry bag is, it's like a little bag to make sure that your electronics don't get wet if there's a problem, and you can get to a phone and call for help if you need to. So all of our phones in the dry bag. And we jump on this tiny little sailboat, all 10 of us, and we set out for sail on the James River, which is this area. And I don't know if has anybody ever been on a sailboat at night in the middle of the water or any kind of boat? Yeah, it's beautiful, right? Yeah.
That's on the rapids.
Yeah, that's true. We were out in the middle of the James. It was so dark. The water's dark. The sky's dark. It's littered with stars. There's a humongous bright white full moon. And I'm surrounded with these like really incredibly inspiring, wonderful people. It was absolutely a beautiful, probably one of my favorite memories ever is that feeling of just like soaring through a river in the middle of the night. So at some point, we decided to take a pause and just be still for a little bit. And not long into that decision, for no certain reason, our boat began to tip. So our boat slowly began to tip this way, and I remember, and I'm tilting this way because in my memory, I actually remember tilting this way until I felt water, and then next thing you know, whoop, we're all in the river, and our boat is upside down. And so at this point, we're like, and I have to like keep myself on task in this story because I could tell you every detail of it and talk about it for hours. But this was a moment where nobody was really upset. Like, we were just kind of like, oh, we're in the river. And I had never been on a sailboat before at all, much less, I'm like, is this a thing that happens? So we all decide together, like, oh, let's flip the boat back over. And in my mind, it's like, oh, no big deal, we'll just flip the boat back over. And we did, except it went all the way over multiple times. And this was not a thing that we were going to be able to fix. A friend of mine was diving under the boat to get to the life jackets and could not get to the life jackets, could not find the dry bag. And nobody thinks we're in trouble because this is a thing that they would sail out and come back on a regular basis. So no one's calling for help. We are now in the middle of the night in the James River, and our boat has sunk to the point where it's 4 to 5 feet below the water. So we don't even have a boat to hang on to. We're just hanging out like, all right, what do we do? And in my mind, like at the time, I thought we should probably stay with the boat. But at this point, with nobody coming to help us and we're all just treading water and we don't really have a boat to hang on to, we sort of made this group decision. And you wouldn't believe how chipper and held together all of us were. Like, all right, guys, let's make a vote. What are we going to do here? Like literally everyone's really being super positive and collaborative and wants to work as a team, and great group of kids. But we make a decision that we're going to swim for sure. So I don't know, anyone here know how far you can swim? Anyone ever tested it? I still, having gone through this, have no idea how far I can swim. But what we didn't know then was that we were in the middle of a part of the James that's 5 miles wide, so 2.5 miles to shore. And we all said, you see that red light over there? We're going to aim for that red light. I actually point this way because in my mind, I know I was looking this way and here's the red light. We're going to swim for that red light. And we're all going to try our best to stay together. So 3, 2, 1, go. I do CrossFit. We say 3, 2, 1, go all the time. Yes. You make fit, I can tell. 3, 2, 1, go. We decide we're going to swim. And stay together. And within 1 minute, it became very clear that we were not going to stay together. So we have rolling, beautiful James River current and waves. And at some point, someone had thrusted a bumper buoy at me. So for a boat this small, a bumper buoy is about this big. So now I have some flotation, and I'm there with my bumper buoy, and everyone else is swimming for their lives, so they're gone, and I'm here, and I have this buoy that gives me a sense of security. But sometimes the things that help us feel secure are the things that hinder us. And that's a whole nother talk. So I had a couple friends that swam near me. My friend Ryan, I just happened to notice that he's backstroking along. And I'm like, Ryan, what are you doing, buddy? And he's like, I can't really swim that well. So I'm just going to backstroke. And in my head, I'm like, why wouldn't you mention that you can't swim very well when we made a group decision to swim for shore? In any case, come over here and get on this buoy with me. And then another friend, the one who had been trying to dive repeatedly to get to the life jackets and the dry bag and couldn't, he comes by looking rather fatigued and struggling, despite that he's a fit swimming man. And I said, hey, come on, you need a break, let's share this buoy. So the three of us comfortably hung onto this safety net bumper buoy that kept us from making any progress whatsoever, despite how hard we think we're swimming. And we're hanging out in the middle of the James River. So it was at that point that I started to contemplate that I might be in some trouble. About 2 hours in to swimming for shore but not getting anywhere, my guy friends weren't looking so hot. As someone who spent my entire life trying to reduce the amount of body fat on my body, I will say that I'm very, very grateful to this day to have a nice whopping 30+% body fat percentage because it insulated me from the 57-degree water that I was swimming in. Unfortunately, the men that I was swimming with were very, very lean and muscular and freezing to death. So despite the beauty of my surroundings, my friends were beginning to fade. And speaking of mindfulness, right, we're at a mindfulness event. I promise you that there is no more mindful moment than being stuck in a river in the middle of the night. Because in these circumstances, at least for me, I couldn't conjure up in my mind anything about the past. And while in our everyday lives, even here today, the future is a figment of our imaginations, right? Like none of it has happened yet. It doesn't actually exist. It's only what we imagine might happen. But in the river, when you think that the future may end or that the future may never happen, that this might actually be your final moment, that this could be the end, it's a lot easier to become present in the moment. So I think the most vivid mindfulness moment that I ever experienced was in the river. And as I began to sense that this might actually be the end for me, quite frankly, it was very, very much a peaceful moment for me. And despite how very full my life was and how much I felt like I knew so much and had it all together, I couldn't seem to conjure up any thoughts about any of it. And so I kind of felt like I had to make a decision. What am I going to do now? If this is going to be the end, what should I do? Should I leave this buoy and these boys, because it'll be more buoyant for them if I'm not also hanging on it, and swim for shore, like actually swim hard instead of holding onto this buoy? And I thought I could probably make it to shore, like super fit. I haven't tested my swimming ability still to this day, which actually now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, maybe I should. But I'm thinking maybe I just go for it. But if I can't make it to shore, then I'm going to be going for it and potentially not make it all the way there, right? So that's one version of the end. The other option is that I stay here. I'm pretty certain that the guys that I'm with are not going to survive, especially not if I'm leaving them, because I was actually like coherent, and these guys at this point are pretty nonverbal and just like doing the basic survival swim. So I thought, okay, I could stay here and be with them, but then I may not be able to help them, and I may just end up in the water for another 4 hours with them, and then I go that way. And then the other option that came to mind, and it kind of still surprises me to this day that this seemed like such a feasible option, was what if I just let go? What if I'm just tired and life is a lot and this is a lot, and if it's gonna be my final moment, what if I just open my arms and let the river take me, and then there's nothing left but peace for me? Why not just let go? And that became a question in that moment. And I was having a hard time coming up with a reason not to let go. Why keep swimming? What is there to fight for? Despite all of the things that I spent all my time and energy on every day in the river, it was hard to think about or even remember any of those things. So for me, the truth is that in that moment, asking that very hard question of myself, I did come up with one answer. And it occurred to me that there was a person in my life who had given so much to make sure that I had a life, and who had sacrificed so much so that I could be living and doing all the things that I'm doing. And I could not bear the idea that my dad might have to endure the loss of me after everything he had sacrificed. So for me, what the decision to fight, to swim, or to not swim boiled down to a person, one person. And I couldn't think of any other person. I certainly did not think of any of the shallow friendships in my life. Work did not occur to me. The only thing that occurred to me was someone that I love, someone who loves me. And alongside that, the sobering realization that there wasn't anything else to fight for. That's not that he wasn't enough, but I didn't want him to be the only thing. So, once I realized, can't die on dad, that was the moment that I was like, okay, this is not the final moment for me. I just knew. And I did also have one of these moments of, I'm not a person who really uses the word God a lot. I am a very spiritual person. I like to think that there's some beautiful thing out there that somehow gives a darn about how things turn out here, one way or another. But once I knew and had made the decision that I had something to fight for, I just kind of looked out into the starry sky and just said, hey, if you're out there, I could use a little help. And looking back, it's interesting, I think, me saying this out loud to the universe, despite the fact that I have these two guys next to me, and not really caring what anybody thinks about it, because at this point, this is it, right? All right, so what do I want to say about this now? Not everyone made it out of the river that night. And it took 6 hours of fighting in the river before, because of some accidental things that happened, dare I say miraculous coincidences, and some very, very difficult decisions by the Coast Guard, someone came looking for us. And after 6 hours in a 57-degree river, we were rescued, some of us. It took more than a couple of years for me to fully dissect what this event really meant for me and how I wanted it to influence my life going forward. I'm sure some of you have heard they've done some studies about people like in their near-death experiences, or people who are near end of life and they know, like, you know, they're dying and they don't have much time left, and they talk a little bit about what they look back on their lives and they're like, what would I have done differently? And one of the top things, there's several, but one of the top things is that they wish they'd been truer to themselves and done what made them happy. They wish that they had not done what everybody else thought they should do. I would phrase that as they wish they had been more connected and true to who they are. And the second thing, one of many, but one of the big ones is that they wish that they had focused on the people that they love over everything else. They had not thought that work and chores and the busyness and stress of day-to-day life was more important than investing in their relationships. And I am really thankful to have experienced a few moments in the river where I thought for a moment that I might be out of time, because I got the gift to ponder whether or not I had anything in my life really worth fighting for. My dad and I have a very good relationship, still to this day, 13 years later. So I want to invite you. This is something for 13 years I've been sharing with people, because I want to invite you to consider for a moment that none of us really knows how much time we have. Not just how much time we have, but how much time our loved ones have. And it does sound cliche at this point because YOLO, you only live once, right? And tomorrow is not promised, right? So we talk about these things, but if you will, I would like to take a moment, if you're here in this room under the sound of my voice and willing, I would like to close our eyes together for a moment. And if you can close your eyes with me, I just want to take you on a little adventure with me to the river. So taking a long inhale through the nose, and then a long exhale through the mouth. Just allow yourself to be present in your body with me for a moment, knowing that you're safe in this room with me. If you can hear my voice, then you are safe here. But just for a moment, imagine that you're going for a swim, that you're in the water and it's dark, that the sky is black and it's littered with the most beautiful bright stars that you've ever seen, more than you can count. The moon is big and bright and full above your head, and you feel yourself swaying and moving with the rolling water around you. And the ground feels way too far below you to reach. Notice that the shoreline, a little bit too far away, is twinkling with city lights. And get a sense of the silence. Hearing the sound of the water as you move through it. I want you to consider for a moment in the river what parts of your life are truly in alignment with your deepest desires. What do you long for? What do you need? And is there anything that comes to mind that's clearly out of alignment in life right now? If you knew you might not make it out of the river today, is there a person, maybe more than one person, who comes to mind that you would swim for? Take a moment to feel how much they mean to you. Take a moment to consider, are you nurturing that connection? Are you investing in these most meaningful relationships in such a way that if tomorrow isn't a gift that we get to experience, you feel like you've truly given your love? You've taken the time to receive their love. And what more do you desire to create for your life? What would you like to say makes life worth swimming for you. Taking a nice deep inhale through the nose, and then exhaling through the mouth. I just want to seal in your hearts the reality that you are worthy of love and belonging, the life that you desire, and the connections and the love that you desire. Feeling your weight in the chair now, feeling the ground beneath your feet, and hearing my voice, I invite you to gently open your eyes. So my goal in sharing my story today and asking you to join me in the river is simply this: to inspire you and remind you that your connection to yourself and your deep, beautiful connections with others are urgent. And they require your attention and your intention to continue to cultivate the closeness and the intimacy that you desire. And if you today make a text or a call or hold your loved ones just a little more closely, I would call that a win. If you realized today that maybe you don't have a lot to swim for, I would love to connect with you to help you get a good sense who you are, how worthy you are, and how to cultivate deeper connections in your life. Thank you.